Point out these gardens that were here. In front of you would have been a giant sea of tents. Again, this is where the Kentucky militia camp really began. In between those tents, you might have found small plots of gardens. Captain Daniel Cushing, the man in charge of the artillery regiment here, wrote in his diary that the officers were allowed to plant gardens inside the fort walls. He had sage, mint, onion, lettuce, and radishes planted in his garden. So that the enlisted men were allowed to go outside the fort walls, gather up any wild fruits and vegetables that were growing in the area. They hunted quite a bit. There were deer in the area, boar, squirrels, whatever they could get their hands on. Went fishing quite a bit in the Maumee River as well. Andrew kind of mentioned this a little bit, but back then the Maumee River was crystal clear and absolutely teeming with fish. Today it's brown and nasty and disgusting. It was so clear, in fact, that there's an account of one man who went to wade in to do some fishing, and he stops at the riverbank. He looks down, he can see the bottom of the river, so he figures it's pretty shallow. So he steps in to wade out a little bit, and he drops into over 10 feet of water, up over his head. But it was that clear he could see all the way down to the bottom. Talking about the fishing that they did here, Captain Cushing, he went out on a small boat for a half a day. In that half a day, he caught 62 white bass. And all that he had for bait was a piece of red rag on a string. 2 days later, in his diary, he said that 2 lieutenants went down to the river. They spent the entire day fishing from the shore. 2 men, one day, they caught 375 fish out of the Maumee River. It's pretty impressive. There's a newspaper reporter here from the Niles Weekly Register, which is the USA Today of its time, said that every day that he was here, the men of the fort were bringing out over 1,000 fish out of the river. One account said that men with spears just went walking along, and they would just kind of stick the spear and they come out with 2 or 3 fish on the end. It was just completely packed from the sound of things. They built a bakehouse off to the east end of the fort so they could get fresh bread. Traders would come here, what they called sutlers. They'd sell off herds of cows and pigs to the army here, and that was the best way to get fresh meat, was to keep the animals alive till you needed it. They had them corralled down to the floodplain. They had slaughterhouses set up down there so you could get the fresh meat that way. The only time when they would really rely heavily on that salted meat, that hardtack, was in the springtime, in the wintertime, when nothing was growing and there was no other alternatives. But armies were expected to live off the land around them, and these guys did it to a very great extent, and I think they ate pretty well while they were here. So, are there any questions at this point? Nope. Okay, our next stop's going to be in Black.